Hey, this is Mad Movie Mark of the Mad Movie Mark Movie Review. Thank you for joining me as I review the 2010 biographical drama Temple Grandin. Temple Grandin has a 100% fresh rating from the critics on Rotten Tomatoes and a 94% fresh rating from the audience. I am currently reviewing every movie that has a 100% fresh rating from the critics in chronological order, and this is my first movie of the 2010s. Now, this movie is absolutely phenomenal. It takes you on an emotional roller coaster, and by the end of the movie, I'm not too proud to say, I was bawling. I was absolutely in tears. It's been a long time since a movie has affected me this way. It's just such a beautiful story, and it ends perfectly exactly how you would want it to end, which not a lot of movies do that anymore. They really try to set you up for disappointment at the end of some movies, but this one ended exactly how you want it to, and it's just incredibly amazing, mesmerizing, beautiful, touching. Like I said, I was in tears by the end of it. Now, this movie was first released on HBO. It never had a theatrical release, but it won a slew of Primetime Emmy Awards, Golden Globe Awards, and Screen Actor Guild Awards. Before I saw this movie, I was very familiar with Temple Grandin. I definitely know who she is. I definitely knew going into this movie that she was autistic. I kind of knew what her story was, but not completely. She got her graduate degree from Arizona State University, which is where I got my undergraduate degree, and she currently teaches animal science at Colorado State University, which is where I got my master's degree. So at Colorado State University in particular, they throw her name around all the time. I mean, she's a teacher there, but everyone talks about how great she is, about how stellar she is in her field. Nothing but great things are said about Temple Grandin at Colorado State University. She definitely lives up to the name that she has in this movie. Now, this is, like I said, it's a biographical movie about Temple Grandin, played by Claire Danes. When she was growing up, she was uncommunicative, she was prone to having tantrums, and she was diagnosed with autism kind of at an early age. Now, back then, they thought autism was a form of schizophrenia, and they thought that autism was caused by a mother not giving her child enough attention, which is absolutely ridiculous. And it's really, at the end of the movie, there's the touching part of this movie. One of the touching scenes of this movie is at the end, so I'm going to spoil the ending here. So if you want to watch it, you can fast forward past this, whatever. But at the end of the movie, when Temple Grandin, she's giving a speech to other autistic kids, it's kind of a speech that she wasn't supposed to give. She just stood up and started talking about autism to try to correct someone else who was giving a speech, and she praises her mom and about how her mom got her through this, and if it wasn't for her mom, she would never have been able to get to where she is in life. Her mom fought for her every step of the way. She believed in her when no one else would, and it's so emotionally wrecking. Like, the mom is crying, I'm crying. It's just such a satisfying ending, because I really felt for the mom in this movie. Autism, of course, is not caused by a mother. We don't know what causes autism, but it's certainly not caused by lack of love from a mother, and I thought she really got what she deserved at the end of this movie. She had a really tough time throughout the entire movie trying to raise Temple Grandin. It's not easy to raise a child who's autistic. I don't have an autistic child, but I know people who do, and it's very hard. It's a very hard challenge to take on, and especially back when Temple Grandin was young, because there was less and less information about it. People didn't know how to treat kids who had autism, so it was very difficult for this mother. And at the end, you're just rallying behind her, and she just gets what she deserves, and it's absolutely amazing. So as Temple Grandin is going on through her life with autism, trying to figure out how to live with it, trying to figure out, she doesn't necessarily like people at all, and I think a lot of it is because that people treat her so poorly. When she has outbursts, when she acts differently than other people, they're really mean and torturous to her, and they treat her really badly. So she ends up going to her aunt's house, I believe, and while she's at her aunt's house, she sees this like calming machine that the cows are put into so that they can, I think it's so they can get vaccines or injections And she decides she's going to build this calming machine of her own too, to see if it works on humans. So she builds this machine, she gets inside of it, it ends up working really well for when she's in distress, for when she's having sort of breakdowns, when she's spiraling out of control. It really helps her calm down, it really helps her get into a headspace where she can relax, where she can think, where she can be clear-minded. And she ends up trying to take this machine to college. Now, when she gets to college, there's this girl who thinks that Temple Grandin is using this machine for some sort of sexual pleasure, and Temple Grandin ends up writing a paper stating, and she ends up testing this on different subjects, stating that there is actually a use case for this, for calming people down, and she is ultimately able to use it. She gets a new roommate, and her roommate is blind, and perfect roommate for Temple Grandin. She is perfectly fine with Temple Grandin using this machine, so she's able to use it. Now, when Temple Grandin is in high school ends up being one of the best times in her life, because she meets a teacher that understands what she's going through, and that understands that she's actually a genius in this field. So he gives her like a poem or something to remember, some sort of written literature to remember, and she looks at it for a couple seconds and she instantly remembers it, because she can create pictures in her head. She can have it in her head and she can just read it while it's there. And he's the only teacher who actually puts time and effort into helping her. The other teachers just write her off and say that she can't focus, that she is just a lost cause. But he actually puts the time and effort to learn how to teach her specifically. There's a project that he gives her where there's like this uneven room. It looks like it's an even room, but one person standing on one end is like a lot taller than a person standing on the other end, even though it's just a room. So he gives her this project to figure out how this works and how it happens, and she ends up having like a really good time with it. She ends up figuring it out, and there's this big sense of accomplishment when she figures it out. The whole class like claps for her and applauds her, which is something that had never happened before. So she ends up having a pretty good time in high school, and then when she has to move to college, there's a huge issue with this, because she doesn't want to go to college. She just wants to stay in high school forever. She wants to be in this comfortable position that she loves forever. She ends up going to college though, and she ends up thriving in college. She like earns her, like I said, her graduate degree at Arizona State University. While she's at Arizona State University, she ends up dealing with a lot of sexism. This field that she's in, she's trying to go into animal science, and specifically with cows. She notices one day that cows move in circles, and she basically wants to do her research paper on cows, and so she has to go to like a dairy farm and research this, and it's very much a male-dominated place. I think she's like the only woman who's there actually, so she gets a lot of male chauvinism. She gets a lot of people putting her down because she's female, and she meets one person, like she did with the teacher, who is willing to give her a chance, who sees that there is genius and promise in her, and he ends up like forging a name on a paper so that she can write this her final master's thesis on the way cows move. And she ends up developing a whole new system for cows getting dipped. I think it's like they say dipped. I think it's like a flea dip or something, where before they would just try to charge them straight through this flea dip, and the cows would get startled, and a lot of them would drown because they would start sloshing around in the water, and they would get turned over on their back, and then they can't get turned back over once they're on their back, and they lost a lot of cows this way. She developed a system where the cows walk in kind of like a circular motion, and people walk the other way in a circular motion, and it keeps the cows calm because they think that people are walking away from them, and they walk this way, and they're able to go down this ramp and enter the flea dip in a very calm manner, and they're not excited and scared because they're moving in a natural pattern that they normally move in. Now, this works out very well. She gets her name in like magazines, on covers of magazines. She writes research papers. Everything goes very well for her. But one day when she's like actually supposed to show how this mechanism works, the people who work at this dairy farm decide to take it apart because they're like, this is stupid. The cows are going to take forever to get through this. Like, let's just do it the old way. And she ends up getting very mad when this happens, and she goes back to her high school teacher and she complains about it, and she says, these idiots don't know what they're doing. It's just like in slaughterhouses where they're doing inefficient ways of getting the cows to the belts and where they need to go. And her teacher says, yes, they are idiots. They are doing it in an inefficient manner, so why don't you design the slaughterhouses? Now, a couple days later, we learn that this teacher passes away. He was sick. He just didn't tell Temple Grandin that he was sick. And she ends up trying to get into a slaughterhouse to show her design, but she again is just met with sexism and met with people who don't want to help her. And even though she's written like scientific papers, like she's known in the field, they will just not let her get her foot in the door until she's at a grocery store one day and she meets the woman who actually is the wife of the person who runs the slaughterhouse, and that woman gets her in to a meeting with the people who run the slaughterhouse. She gives her blueprints of how it should run, again in like a circular motion where they go up like this conveyor belt type thing, and it works. It's like perfect. It's fantastic. She ends up designing it, and it revolutionizes the way that they do slaughterhouses. She says in the movie that cows give us so much. They provide us beef, they provide us milk, they provide people with so much that if we're going to kill them, we should at least treat them in a humane manner and actually show them a little bit of respect before we kill them. So that's basically her thesis throughout the entire movie. I'm a vegan, so I don't think you necessarily have to eat meat. Because I don't, but I agree that if you feel like you have to eat meat and you feel like you have to drink milk, at least treat the animal with some respect and don't like have it live this incredibly terrible life before you kill it. So I agree with her on that. And then at the end of the movie, she ends up going to this talk on autism. Now her motto throughout the movie also is that she's trying to open doors. She's trying to open doors and go through them and go to the next point in her life and continue to open doors and become better and better and better and better and have more opportunities and more opportunities. So she ends up going to this talk about autism, and there's a person on stage who's giving this speech about it's just all the stuff that is hogwash, doesn't make any sense, how a mother's neglect will cause your child to have autism. He starts telling people to try to quiet your child down, they're being too disruptive, and all this stuff, and he's just being very negative about what he's saying. And then Temple Grandin jumps up and she says, like, hey, none of that's true. And they ask her, oh, like, how old is your daughter? And she says, I don't have a daughter, but I have autism, and I just finished my master's degree and I'm working on my PhD. And then literally everyone starts answering her and they are listening to her, and then they show her like walking through a door, like she's walking through another path, that she's going to be a public speaker now that she's able to do this. But she just talks about how you need people in your life who will be there for you. You need people in your life who will tell you that things are possible, who will learn your way of learning and try to teach you in the best way that you learn. And you need to get away from the negative people. There are people out there that you can seek. There are people out there who will understand you. There's people out there who will work with you. You just have to find them, and you have to be able to grow with them, and you have to be able to be open-minded that there are people out there who aren't just after you to make fun of you and to put you down and to laugh at you, basically. And it's just such oh my god, it's just such an emotional ending. It's the perfect ending to this movie. It's just I couldn't have telegraphed a more perfect ending to this movie. It is so good. This movie is so amazing. Um, like I said, the acting is fantastic. The writing is spectacular. The cinematography is amazing. I love everything about this movie. I can't think of one real thing that I disliked about this movie. Maybe in the beginning, maybe the pacing was a little bit slow. Maybe it took a little bit of time to get where they wanted to get to. But the relationships that she finds in this movie, like the high school teacher that she finds, the guy who helps her at the ranch. It seems like you're losing all hope with her. I know she succeeds, I know she's successful, but as you're watching the movie, you're still kind of losing this hope and losing this sense of humanity and that people are good. And then finally, someone comes up and shows you that that's not true, that humanity is not dead, that there are still good people out there, and they do it well enough. They do enough like breaks in the middle of these to where you can give up on society and then be totally into society and then give up on society and then not give up on society. And it's just such a roller coaster. It's such a back and forth ping pong ball, this movie, but the ending ends up making it wonderful. I give this movie a 9.5 out of 10. I wish it was a theatrical release movie. I never know if I should do non-theatrical release movies for this list. I think Threads was another movie that was never theatrically released. That was just a made-for-TV movie that I also did. War and Peace, I think, was also a miniseries that wasn't theatrically released. It might have been, but I don't think it was. But it's crazy because the movies that are not theatrically released are some of the best movies I've seen. I gave War and Peace a 10 out of 10. I think Threads was like an 8.5. I mean, they're just so phenomenal. And this definitely lived up to that expectation. This movie was absolutely amazing. I already told my wife that she needs to see it. My wife's mother actually saw it this years ago, and she always brings this movie up. Every time we go to her house, she always brings up Temple Grandin because my wife is a veterinarian, and she always brings up this movie. It streams on Prime, and they have Prime, and I think she watches it a lot, but she always brings this movie up, and I kind of like when people recommend movies to me, aside from the movies that are recommended to me on here, I'm going to watch those and rate them, but in my personal life, when people recommend movies to me, I don't usually care. I don't usually watch them, but I think I'm going to start listening to her more often because this movie was absolutely phenomenal. 9.5 out of 10. I hope you join me for my next review, which is going to be a foreign film called Poetry. Thank you. Have a great day.